Hello, welcome everyone. We'll just give it a couple moments. I can see people are trickling in, connecting to audio. So just give it a couple seconds and then go ahead and get started with an introduction that we'll keep very brief because I know we're all here not to hear home base speak today, but to hear Dimitri. So I want to give him more than enough time. But if you're here joining us today, you're here for our working through burnout, empathy, fatigue, and secondary trauma training that we've held now at least once a year. And it's been a very popular training that we've held. And so I just want to do a quick introduction. My name is Nicole Thomas. For those of you who don't know me already, I am a policy analyst at Homebase, and I'm joined by my colleague Carla today. And we are a technical assistance provider, and we work with COCs across the nation. And particularly in Santa Clara County, we work really closely with the Office of Supportive Housing. And one of the many things we do is we help organize and lead trainings on behalf of the Office of Supportive Housing, and this is one of them. So I just want to quickly run through some tech logistics for today. So because we are a larger group and we're continuously having people join in from the waiting room, we are going to ask that you keep yourself on mute while Dimitri's speaking, just to minimize background noise. We definitely want this to be very participatory so that there will be ample opportunity for you to come off of mute and verbally share things. But that being said, we're also going to be monitoring the chat box throughout the training. So if you have questions, comments, thoughts, please pop them into the chat box and we'll have opportunities to be reading those out. So that is one opportunity. If you're having any tech issues, having any issues connecting with audio, or more broadly, we're having issues with Bridge, please feel free to let me know directly. You can send me a private message. We know this is a new platform for you to access the trainings. So we thank you for your patience as we figure that out together. Do want to note that this training, like all of our trainings, is being recorded, and the recording, along with a PDF of the slides that are being shared today, you are going to receive a copy of that. We'll send an email out to the listserv notifying you when these materials have been uploaded to the COC training website. So both the recording and the slide deck you will have a copy of. And then finally, just want to note that closed captioning is available. I've enabled the subtitles or the closed captioning, so you should be able to get that live transcript. But if you're not seeing it, again, feel free to send me a direct message and we can help you figure that out. That being said, like I said, we're really going to try and point you to the chat box to have participation be there throughout the training. So just to make sure we're all familiarized with the chat box, can you go ahead and introduce yourself with your name, your organization, and then let me know what your favorite fruit combo is. And for those who maybe aren't fruit fans, although I hope everyone likes fruit, you could give me your favorite snack alternative. I think I'm a fan of like mixed berries. So any kind of like blackberry, blueberry, blackberry, raspberry situation is probably my favorite fruit combo. So I will hand it now over to Dimitri without further ado.
Hello. Let's see, I need to make, can everybody see me? Do I have, is it automatically, oh, there I am, okay. All right. Well, I'm super happy to be back with you guys. My name is Dimitri Wolfovich. Some of you may have already remembered me or have taken training with me, and some of you, maybe if I'm new, then glad to meet you. I am a psychotherapist in San Jose, actually in Campbell now. And I'm also a clinical director at the Process Therapy Institute, where we teach therapists and people in the healing arts, experiential holistic psychotherapy. So a lot of these, what I'm teaching sort of stems from my last 12 years of working in this field. And So I'll just go ahead and get started. Like Nicole said, if you want to ask a question, make a comment, or even contribute something that you'd like to contribute, you can either chat in, and I'll be making little pauses along the way as I kind of go over a concept or talk about something. I may stop and say, "What do you guys think?" or any comments. So feel free to unmute yourself, and I'd love to engage with you. So that I can make this relevant and helpful for you guys. And I'm gonna go ahead and share screen. Okay. Well, here we are. So let me just, all right. So I like to start off with this. This is I've changed some slides with this training because there's some of you that are returning, so I've updated it. So there's going to be some new material, but this is an old slide I've kept. If your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete. I like to start with this. So keep in mind that I don't know if you've heard this concept of sort of all parts are welcome. And you can think about it that within you, there is a community of parts, okay? And you're not just one self, right? So that's why you disagree with yourself sometimes. You have opposing inner conflict, right? And so if you think about yourself as a sort of community of parts, then you will have certain parts that you may like or certain parts that you may not like. Now, my invitation to you from the start is to consider that even if there's parts of you that you don't like or you can't accept, right? Like, oh, I can't accept that I did that, or you feel regret about something you did, or you don't like something about yourself in general. Even if you don't like that part, you could still have compassion for it. Instead of like, admonishment or some kind of lament or something like that. And because compassion is even if you can't accept yourself or don't like some part of yourself, compassion is still something that's going to benefit you or that part. It'll only enhance you. So that's what I want to start off with, just looking at that piece, because often we're divided against ourselves. Any comments? Anyone has anything to say? Does that make sense to people? And so in traditional psychology, they would call that the internal gestalt. And the idea is that you can talk to different parts of yourself. And many people talk to themselves all the time. They may have conversations with themselves. And sometimes in therapy, we would actually put in an empty chair, we would put a part of yourself. Like you could talk to your sadness, or you talk to your anger. You could talk to your fatigue. When you guys work with people in the community, and we'll kind of go into this later, you may have parts of you that disagree with you. Maybe a part of you would like to really help somebody out or support somebody, but there's another part of you that may be fatigued or tired, or you have a headache. And so it's the trick is to how to look at how can we honor all the parts, honor the part of you that wants to help, and maybe honor the part of you that needs rest, and how to integrate those two, how to have them working together. And the real key here is when your system, when your body and mind and soul and everything is working in collaboration, meaning that it's one kind of unionized system, there is a lot more potential in the human being. When you're divided against yourself, you have less potential. So that's the secret. The secret is to how to collaborate with yourself and not fight yourself. And if you can collaborate yourself, then you have a lot more potential. You have infinite potential, potentially. So
I have a
that
question.
say that again.
Excuse me, I have a question. Can I actually associate that with the behavior of with my job description, but what my beliefs are to be productive or to be effective with that situation? So in other words, to actually collaborate with myself to be as one thought. Does that make sense at all?
Can you explain a little bit more?
Okay, so initially you said to have compassion with yourself, and even if you don't agree with that, or even if it doesn't pertain to you, correct? Is that the initial, have compassion for yourself, include yourself, correct?
Yeah, meaning like understanding, even if you don't agree.
Okay, exactly. So I'm retaining that from you, but now, so my thought is it aligning with this kind of thinking in my brain? Is that if I'm doing a task with someone in the community and the process is this, but I'm thinking to be more effective, but it might be out of my scope of services, is it better for me to be as one and not conflicting with those thoughts? It's a little complicated, but that's my. Let's just pass that. I'll ask after.
Perhaps it will make more sense as we continue the training. And maybe why don't you kind of keep that question, and then maybe as we go along, maybe we can come back to it. It would
Okay,
maybe make more
wonderful.
sense.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So continue here. All right. So first we start with why you guys do what you do. And so you can call that compassion satisfaction, or why do you participate in the helping profession? And these are the kinds of things that motivate us. So you may feel pleasure or satisfaction from working in the helping profession. You may feel like a giver, or doing giving to the community, or connecting to the community, feeling like you're part of the remedy. And, feeling like you're contributing to something in the homeless community or in the mental health community, working in collaboration with your colleagues, feeling a sense of unity with other people, beliefs about yourself, having a certain identity that you're a healer or a giver or a facilitator, or whatever your identity may be derived, feeling a sense of altruism. And it's sort of a self-serving thing, and that's okay, because we want to feel good about what we do, and that has sort of an intrinsic motivation. And doing it because it makes you feel good. Of course, you will never be able to save or rehabilitate everybody on this planet, or in your community, but you can certainly do it because it makes you feel good. And I'm wondering maybe if some of you want to comment on why do you do what you do, or what brought you to the helping profession, or I don't know, maybe a couple of you want to sort of comment. That would be interesting.
I am seeing some answers in the chat. So making an impact, it makes me feel connected to other people.
Nice. That's great.
Wanting to be part of something bigger than me or just money, because I may just have a good day and be the light at the end of the tunnel for someone in the dark.
Oh,
Creative.
that's sweet. Yeah, so these are the reasons why we do it. Okay. Now we're going to move forward and we're going to look at what gets in the way of that. Okay. Now, sometimes we call it compassion fatigue. It's when helping others hurts us. Sometimes you can see it as, in this image, sort of a circuit of energy that is sort of unbalanced, maybe giving more than you receive. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about right now some of the pitfalls of how helping can be hurtful or taxing. So the first, and we're going to go over the burnout and secondary trauma, and we're not going to spend too much time because I want to focus more on solutions and how to help you guys not be stunted by it. So we're not going to spend too much time on this, but just to cover quickly what things happen or can happen. So the first one is burnout. It's helping to the point where it feels self-destructive, a feeling of hopelessness, ineffectiveness. Nothing I will do will help them. Feeling exhaustion, overextending of yourself. Sometimes it can feel like going through the motions and finding yourself being resentful towards your clients or staff, colleagues. And burnout is usually a gradual onset. So it's something that kind of develops and creeps up on you, perhaps, and it may come and go. And of course, there are physiological or somatic symptoms that you may find about that, where such as headaches or mood swings or fatigue. And we'll get into it more, but yeah, you'll find what I call, or in the process model, what we call secondary signal, and it's basically when you have something that's in your body, or sometimes in your dreams too, but sometimes a signal that comes not from your regular awareness. Like your regular awareness or your concept of self, you may say, oh, I'm doing a good job and I'm working in the field and I'm supporting people. But the secondary signal is like that headache or that fatigue, where it just comes out of nowhere and you think, well, why is that? Why am I feeling that all of a sudden? The secondary signal is a part of you that's trying to let you know that there's something up. It's sort of like a check engine light. Okay. And the next part is what we call secondary trauma stress. It's a little bit different from burnout. It looks like feeling frightened, being preoccupied with the people that you've helped, sometimes having intrusive thoughts or feeling trapped, sometimes feeling on edge or feeling hypervigilant. And particularly with when you speaking or helping people who are going through a traumatic experience or processing something traumatic, and you may feel it in your body too. You may have a certain sense of panickiness inside of you, or tension, or anxiety, and it looks like having an inability to separate yourself from your client. Feeling kind of identified with them. And you also sometimes may feel numb, or have feeling kind of a flat feeling, and as well as irrational fears. So, and this is a little bit different from burnout, because secondary trauma stress, it has a lot to do with you, and your own adverse experiences that you've had in your life. So if and we all have them, right? So we've all had adverse experiences growing up, just because having parents, we have parents, and no parent is perfect, right? So you have, and some people worse than others, and some people grew up in much harsher environments than others. And so when you're helping somebody, and they're sharing with you their traumatic event or currently going through a traumatic event. And sometimes, not always, sometimes it may trigger you in a way where you kind of relate or identify with the way in which what they're going through. That can elicit something that sort of brings out your own trauma. Okay, now of course not to the same degree as perhaps they're experiencing it, but it can trigger that, and that's when it starts to impact you. And the tricky thing is that sometimes it's hard to know immediately that it's really your own stuff, because you're thinking about the client, right? So you're identifying with the client, but it oftentimes has something to do with you. Otherwise, you wouldn't have such a big trigger. And so that's why it's important to get support, and to use it as an opportunity to see if there's still something unresolved within your own life. And that's what therapists have to do, actually, when therapists get triggered. And anybody who's helping somebody else, and when they get triggered, it's an opportunity to actually go deeper inside of yourself and get some help about, to see if there's something that still hasn't been flushed out within your own personal work. Okay, and we'll be getting into that in this training about how ways you can do that. Okay, any comments thus far? Nicole, is there anything in the chat? No?
Not seeing anything yet, but maybe they're typing out a longer. If you want to come off of mute, though, you could also do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's move on. Unless there's somebody else, then you just let me know if somebody starts to chat in. So trauma in the body. I'm sure that by this point you've been all somehow heard about trauma and somatic psychology. I'm sure you've read the book, maybe The Body Keeps a Score by Bessel van der Kolk. It's very popular. But that seems to be kind of the more cutting edge way of looking at trauma, is how it's stored in the body. So every time something happens that is potentially dangerous, that it gets recorded in your body, physiologically, somatically. And stressful events create holding patterns. So you can think about it like if somebody was to get in your face, like somebody was to charge at you, you would naturally flinch or brace, right? And that bracing is what we call holding patterns. It's sort of a muscular armor, and that when you do that, and when you have maybe repeated experiences where you don't feel safe, then that sort of tension or bracing starts to become a regular thing. And when it becomes a regular thing, you start to carry tension in your body, and you start to carry that bracing, and it can impact you because it starts to create a lot of stress hormones, and just a general sense of unease, because the body is still anticipating danger. And so what we want to do is we want to invite you to become more attentive to those stressors, and we'll be teaching you later how to attend to your body through a body scan meditation, and also just generally being more attentive to is there any unease or tension in my body, so that can be released. But it can't be released until you are aware of it. Sometimes I'll invite a client to, do a body scan, and before they come into the office, they're like, okay, I'm feeling okay. And after they come into the office and they do a body scan, they realize that they have a stomach ache, they have a headache, they have like shoulder tension, a whole bunch of things happening that they weren't aware of. So there's sort of layers, almost like subsurface layers of awareness that you may discover as you become more attentive. And with your attention, you can sort of support your body and sort of learn to make it aware that there isn't really any more danger right now, that those dangers were more from the past perhaps, and now it's okay, now it's safe. But the body needs a little bit of affirmation, or needs a little bit of support to actually come back to a state of peace. And also, and sometimes in your posture, you can notice certain things that are indicative of trauma or adverse events, in the way that you sit, in the way that you walk. Sometimes people who, as you know, even old kind of colloquial things that we may hear growing up in America or anywhere else, for that matter, things like, oh, holding your head up high, or having a good standing in the world, or bearing the world on your shoulders, or something like that. There's certain things that are kind of slangy that you associate with, but you can see, like, if a person has low self-esteem, they may kind of look down, or they may have a bad posture. So if you find yourself with a certain type of posture, be curious about yourself and notice what that says about you and how you are. Not to judge yourself, but to become more familiar. And also with your clients, you can see a lot about a person in the way that they are, the way that they stand, or the way that they walk. Are they dragging their feet when they walk, or are they skipping along? It says a lot about their attitude. And the other thing about trauma is that it's not defined by the event, but rather by the person's reaction or story they tell themselves as a result. And so keep that in mind, that every client has their own unique story, and each person, and you have your own unique story too, and that sometimes growing up in an environment where there isn't really anything that is like particularly violent or aggressive per se, but perhaps a prolonged emotional abuse or something. Sometimes I've heard this metaphor of, when you have like near the ocean, where you have a certain drop. There's a bit of a noise. When you have a bit of a drop, and you have like a raindrop that falls on a rock, and after it does that for many years, it creates a bit of a groove or an indent. You could think about it that way too, with like bullying and things, and like, or if a sibling is mean to you when you're growing up, or a parent is, and little by little they sort of create these inadvertent abusive statements or something like that. And over time, the person can develop a problem, like OCD or other mental health issues. And it doesn't have to be something overt, like being raped or surviving some kind of natural disaster. It can be a prolonged pain. Okay, so we can maybe pause here and notice if there's any comments.
There were a couple of comments just saying that they love the book you mentioned, what a meaningful book on how trauma occurs and ways in which we can heal. And then there was a question: what if the body tells you this working environment is hostile to your well-being? What do you do?
Well, I mean, naturally, I would want to listen to the body regardless of what it says. Now, that doesn't mean that every voice is something that you have to act on right away, but certainly take into consideration, right? It's not like you have to like jump out the window or something, you know, run away right now in this very moment, you know. But listening to that part of you and noticing what it needs, and like I said, collaborating with yourself, cooperating with yourself, honoring it, and sometimes there's a bit of a negotiation with that signal. Like there's a bit of like, okay, well, I can try this, or I can try that, or I can move, I can go, you know, work part-time, or I can change my chair, or I can change departments, or maybe it will, well, maybe it will take, not every job is for everybody, you know, maybe it will take adjusting to another work environment. I don't know for sure, but certainly, if there's something, a signal coming in from the body, it's at least something to pay attention to and be curious about, not necessarily reacting to. Let me know if that helps.
I'm seeing another comment. Gender socialization is one of those pervasive traumas that occurs in small amounts over long periods of time. Sometimes could even be one event, but oftentimes happen over lifetimes.
Yep. I agree. And the person said gender socialization. Is that what she said? The person?
That's correct.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm assuming they mean that sort of ways that perhaps we're encrypted into believing maybe limitations about ourselves based on like what we're like, oh, if you're a girl, you can't make enough money, or or those types of sort of beliefs. I'm assuming they're talking about, and that's absolutely true if that's what you're talking about. At least that's how I take it. That you grow up with certain beliefs, and they are instilled in you. Yeah.
I guess there's also some comments in the chat talking about like if that is what the person meant by gender socialization and those limiting beliefs, is that considered trauma or more so psychological pain and enduring suffering, or like where is the distinction between what would be categorized as trauma and what is that enduring suffering and pain but not quite trauma?
That's a great question. It used to be the case that people thought that trauma was something that was a clear line. Now, more and more, now, of course, there are people there. You may talk to professionals that will disagree with me, but as far as I'm concerned, and a lot of these people that are on the cutting edge, like Van der Kolk and others, Pat Ogden, and these other trauma experts. What I believe is that everything is trauma. And everything stems from, and it depends. How I define trauma is adjustment to adverse circumstance. So anytime you're adjusting to adverse circumstances, it can be potentially traumatic. I think there's something called big T trauma, which is something like a life-threatening event. But I think more and more now, there is this understanding that even existing is traumatic. Like going through the birth canal is traumatic. Like life inherently is traumatic. Like gravity itself is traumatic, because if you can easily fall if you trip. So there's something traumatic about existing, in the sense that there's inherent adversity all the time, and you are adjusting to the adversity all the time. And so in some ways, everything is traumatic, and all mental health issues stem from adjustment to adversity. So whether you have an eating disorder, whether you have alcoholism, whether you have anxiety or depression, whether you have people pleasing, any problem that you're experiencing can be traced to some level of adjusting to something that was difficult or adverse. So I think that, of course, there are clear cases of PTSD as a syndrome, like something that is life-threatening. But as far as trauma goes, I think everything can be traced back to some unmet need, something that wasn't incomplete, and the person is adjusting to that incompleteness, and that's their trauma. Let me know if that makes sense. I think this will help you understand it. The 4 basic types of adaptation to adverse circumstances is fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Okay, and I'm sure you've heard of this stuff before, fight or flight, right? Now, fight or flight, traditionally, when I was in school and I was in like college and things like that, we were taught that fight or flight was something that you're being beaten and you choose to either run away or fight them off. That was the traditional kind of definition. But actually, it's much more complex than that. Fight or flight, freeze, and fawn are ways that we survive not just completely dangerous situations, but things that don't meet our needs. So we can start with, for instance, let's start with fawn. Okay, now fawning is, you can think about it as like when a tiger is jumping onto the deer, approaching it, and it sort of like freezes. It doesn't freeze, but it sort of gives itself away, right? It sort of sacrifices itself over. So that's fawning. Now, fawning is a type of, like it says here, people pleasing, avoiding conflict, prioritizing others' needs over your own, difficulty saying no, not being able to set boundaries. Now, think about it. Why would somebody, why would you need to people please? What kind of evolutionary or survival tactic would that be? Why would somebody need to people please?
Like if your experience has been that even small deviations from pleasing people results in harsh punishment.
Exactly. I have to people please you so you don't beat me. I have to people please you so you don't abandon me. I have to people please you so you feed me, right? So then you have people pleasing as a personality trait, right? Somebody who laughs when they're insulted, or puts themselves down in social groups or things like that. And it becomes a personality. It becomes a way of existing, and that's all you know about yourself, right? And people call, sometimes you can be pathological and call somebody who, they may have a borderline personality disorder or things like that. But really, it's not. See, that's where I'm really against pathologizing people, is because all mental health issues actually come from adjustments to adversity, adaptations to adversity. And so fawning is a way that people survive, and then they start to create, and that their personality is developed and organized around that. And so they people please. But really, it's not because there's something wrong with them. It's because they've learned that was the way that they found, that was their best way of adapting. And then we can move on to freezing, which is another form of adapting. Now this one's a little bit different. It looks at feeling stuck, collapsed, immobilized. This is like depression, spacing out, disassociating. maybe feeling shameful. This is also related to drug abuse, like taking pills, drinking alcohol, checking out, right? This is what freezing is all about, not feeling the adversity. And actually, if you think about it, the highest form of freezing is passing out. If you're being beaten, or if you're being in a dangerous situation, some people will just pass out. Their body will just shut down, because that's the ultimate disassociation, is just to go into a complete amnesia. And that's another form of adaptation. So if a person is numbing themselves either by drugs or other addictive processes, or withdrawing in depression, that's just them. That's just how they learn to adapt. You don't withdraw from something unless there's something negative to withdraw from. You don't just get depressed out of a lovely, loving family that took care of you every moment and had joyful moments all the time. Right? And then we have flight, which is the other form of adaptation, and it's anxiety, fear, panic, avoiding, chronic worry, perfectionism. This is where we have OCD type things, anxiety, sort of perfectionism. People cleaning, and we can have a combination of these to certain degrees. Things that you may notice that when you're cleaning, you may feel a little bit of relief or something, because you're kind of keeping this flighty, activated state. Now at extremes, this is like a hypervigilance. So you're looking out for danger, making sure that nothing is going to hurt you. So you're highly sensitive to loud noise and anticipating danger, and to a certain kind of degree, maybe even schizophrenia, in the sense that you're kind of imagining things that may happen before they do. So you can actually place every mental health disorder within this quadrant, these 4 quadrants, to some degree. And then the last one is fight, and irritability, anger, aggression, moving towards. This is domestic violence, narcissism. Now, again, just like borderline, narcissism is often given a bad rap, as if it's somehow, deems less compassion than the others. But think about it: a child that has to find self-importance, or think of themselves as more important than others, doesn't come from a loving environment. Usually people who are aggressive or violent had to become that way because of their circumstances. They had to adjust, and they chose to fight. They chose to fight their way through it, and they also chose to, because they weren't given the dignity, they had to force their way to feeling important. And then that's where they become a little bit more narcissistic. But these are all just adaptations to adverse events. Okay, maybe we can pause here and notice if there's any comments.
There was, I think, just a comment maybe that fawning and flocking are considered overlapping. And then I think when we were talking about why people might people please as like a protective response, someone also noted that, like, evolutionarily speaking, we are group centers. So maybe we're people pleasing to be in a group in order to survive and, have access to things like food, shelter, water, protection. So that's like a part of a evolutionary response.
Yep.
There's a question on, would micromanaging be a trauma response?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I invite you guys to think for yourself and be, you know, critical on your own right. And I can only give my own thoughts, but yeah, I could see how micromanaging is a form of control, or maybe a flighty kind of sense of like needing to control or be perfectionistic, not allowing or not trusting whatever's happening. Yeah. I also want to comment quickly about the previous comment that was made about being in packs or tribes. I think that's absolutely true, and I think that's where the feeling of shame comes in. Although it's here in freeze, you know, these are all kind of intermixed, but shame has a certain kind of faculty of preventing exile, because if you think about it, like we used to, you know, thousands of years ago, we lived sort of in tribes or in packs, and it wasn't like now where you have a society, you know, where you know, if you get kicked out, you know, you have like welfare system or whatever, you know, somehow the community might take care of you, or if not, maybe maybe you'll be homeless, but there's a certain kind of, you may have food assistance, but you know, back at thousands of years back, you know, you lived in a tribe, and if you got kicked out, you would be out there in the bare elements. You'd be cold, and you'd probably be eaten alive by wild animals, or other tribes will kill you. So there was a stronger risk to be exiled from your community or from your tribe. And that's why the faculty of shame is an evolutionary feeling, because the shame is what, it's like a social anxiety that comes up and tells you you're at the risk of being exiled by your community. Your people are not going to like you for what you do or what you did. So shame is the part of us that doesn't want to be exiled or kicked out of our community. That's why we feel shamed when people write about us on Facebook, or if you have some kind of social dispute, right? But it's a useful, I mean, not to be stuck in shame, but to understand that shame has that quality of trying to prevent exile. Okay. All right, so what is anxiety? Anxiety comes from the root word, German word Angst. And it is defined as the narrowing or choking of the breathing passageways. So do something with me for a moment as a little experiential break. Take a deep breath, and then hold your stomach and your chest and your throat, and hold your breath at the same time. Just sort of tighten your whole midsection, and don't breathe for like 2 or 3 seconds. All right, do it with me. And let go. And so that may give you a bit of sense of what anxiety feels like. Okay. And so I want you to become more aware of your breathing in general, because your breathing is sort of a good way to measure how you're doing. Your breathing can become feverish sometimes, like maybe there's a little bit of fear in your breathing. Your breathing can be deep. Your breathing could be shallow. Your breathing could have all sorts of qualities, nuanced qualities. And it can really be indicative of how you're feeling and how much bracing is happening in your body that you may not be in touch with, or certain things that you're anticipating in your day, or you're worried about things. And again, these could be secondary signals. What I want you guys to do is become more aware of your secondary signals. Secondary signals are ways that your body is communicating to you that you may not be aware of. And you just because you tell yourself that you're okay, doesn't change your body. Your body is going to continue to digest its food. Your body is going to continue to pump the blood, and all the mechanisms in your body are still keep going, regardless of how you may think of yourself. And it's the same thing with catching, your immunity, and getting sick or things like that. You can not want to get sick, but you get sick anyways, and that's why we get upset when we get sick. You get angry, like, damn it, why am I sick? Because there's something else going on in your body, and so becoming more attuned to that is really can help you become more whole and have a much easier time existing. And again, you tighten because we brace, and we're trying to brace for the impact or perceived danger, perceived or real danger that's happening. So I want you guys to get to know your own selves, and that can help you. And we'll go later at the end. We'll do a meditation where I show you how to do that. Any questions so far? Okay.
Not seeing any in the chat, but I will let you know.
Sounds good. Okay. So tools we're going to start with some things that we can do to help. Okay. So tools for personal survival. First thing is acknowledging the impact of your stress. It's what we call this coming to terms, right? So being kind of honest with yourself. That is the first step. There's no use in denying how you feel or what's happening. And so being okay with not being okay is the first step. And that will take you a notch down, and at least you'll be on your own side. You'll be kind of on your own team at that point. And the other thing is that there's something called the 2-minute rule or 90-second rule, or people call it different things, but it's how long it takes for your body to activate cortisol in the blood, making it harder to redirect out of a low mood. Because what happens is, like, if you get caught in sort of a negative thought loop, after a while, your body kind of initiates cortisol, which is sort of this survival stress hormone. Now, of course, your cortisol is a natural thing. You use cortisol all the time to get prepped for something stressful, or when you're like racing or running, or when you're working at the gym. So it's essential hormone, but it's about how much of it you need. You don't need so much of it all the time, because it does lead to immunosuppression. So it makes your immunity weak if you have too much cortisol running all the time. And so if you stay stuck in a sort of a negative thought loop, you will eventually feel this sort of fatigue set in, and that's sort of your body's flooded with this stress hormone. And at that point, it's sort of harder to come out of it, even if you clear your mind, because you'll then be kind of having to flush out that. And there are two primary ways to flush out cortisol, and it's either through crying or sweating. And so sometimes a person will have to cry, because that's what it literally comes out through the tears. And sweating also does the same trick. Sometimes people find themselves sweating a lot when they're stressed, obviously, and that's a natural thing. That means that your body's working. Don't try to get prescription strength deodorant or nothing like that, because that's your body's working. And the way to potentially do that, to kind of navigate out of it, is maybe going outside, changing your scenery. Sometimes it helps to take a shower, or just do something different if you're kind of really stuck and there's nothing you can do to come out of it. The other thing is allowance of your feelings. We're going to talk about that probably in the next couple slides, but allowing your feelings is important too, because if you resist what you're feeling, it doesn't help. You're just kind of fighting yourself. Sometimes it helps to just allow the sadness or allow the anger to be there and just to let it express itself. And these are kind of bullet points, we'll kind of get into them. And then the next thing is perception and beliefs. Taking a look at what you're telling yourself. Sometimes the stressful situation has more to do with how you interpreted it than the actual happening. So for instance, let's say if a colleague called me skinny or something like that, and I took that as a compliment, and I thought, oh man, that's great, man. That's such a great thing. I look great, and he just said I look great too. And then I don't get stressed out about it. Now, if I think to myself that he called me skinny because he's trying to insult me, I will maybe feel bad and say, oh, I'm being harassed at work, and I don't feel good about it, and this person, I'm going to go talk to HR about them or something. I don't know, whatever. So really, and that's just an example of a particular perception that I may have can change the way that I deal with the situation. And that also has to do with the fact that I have to pay attention to what my insecurities are. So if I'm insecure about how thin I am, I may be on the lookout for people speaking about it negatively. And so I may misconstrue what people are saying because I'm kind of, my radar is out because I'm naturally insecure. So a lot of it has to do with our own insecurities and how we perceive things and how we take offense to things, and are we suspicious about other people, and are we always suspecting that people are kind of malicious or something like that. And then the other part is focusing on what you can control. Staying self-focused, because you can't change others, and letting go of the need for people to be different, respecting their refusal to get well or be different, and having dignity for all other people, and being a role model for ease and wellness. So we're going to get into some of these. Anything off the bat any comments so far?
Yeah, there was a comment, I guess, linking back to that cortisol release in sweat. Someone noted that they tend to go to the gym a lot when they feel stressed, and they're then sweating a lot, and asking, like, would that help out with that stress and that cortisol, I guess, the working out and the sweating as a byproduct of that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I would say take the question mark out of it, and then you have a statement. But yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, that's definitely helpful. Along with understanding the process and how, more also understanding how you're participating in the situation, and ways to beyond just coping with it, which is going to the gym, but also looking at ways that you can participate in a situation that doesn't hurt you, perhaps. But yeah, going to the gym is always a great thing.
Someone also shared a quote they particularly like. The cure for anything is salt water, sweat, tears, or the sea.
Nice. Especially if it's super cold. Okay. Speaking of sea, a smooth sea never made a skilled sailor. Also keep in mind that, sometimes only in hindsight can you look back on and say, oh, that was kind of good that happened. Otherwise I wouldn't have chosen it. Like there's always a silver lining in the clouds about things. And I think it's important to have that sense of fascination and open-mindedness about what you can learn from events that are seemingly uncomfortable or difficult, because in that sense, you never really lose, because you don't lose the lesson. You know, they say if you lose, don't lose the lesson. Because there's always something that you can gain from a situation, and sometimes immediately it seems like it's a horrible thing, but as you work through it and you come out of it, then you look back on it and you say, oh wow, I'm glad that happened because I learned so much from it. I'm better off now. So there's that paradox, right? When if nothing difficult ever happened, would we ever learn about things and about life? And that's why I think trauma is such a neutral thing, right? It's adversity is a neutral thing, because we can never remove adversity altogether. Like gravity, right? We can't remove gravity, and if you fall and hit your head, you know, it's gravity's fault, but that's just how things go.
There are two questions in the chat. So one person said, I notice a point is to respect the refusal of someone to get well, or I suppose accept services. In my line of work, I'm told to help people who sometimes do not want the help. How do you navigate the expectations of work versus the client's inability to want the help at that moment?
I will answer that question in one of the next slides. In this one, actually. Good. You read my mind. Okay. Well, that's good. I can actually go ahead and answer the question then. What I want you to think about is that there's a difference between wanting somebody to change and the best intervention that you can do to make that happen. Okay? Does that make sense to you guys? There's a difference between wanting to make something happen and the best intervention to make that happen. Best strategy. So for example, let's say I want my client to stop drinking, or let's say I want my wife to stop drinking, or let's just say anybody in your life, whether it's a client or whether it's a person. You want them to stop drinking. Now, let's say that you telling them to stop drinking doesn't work. Naturally, you would go back to the drawing board and look at other strategies that could help, right? So, and some of your strategies may be creative. Some of your strategies may be boundary setting. Some of your strategies may be reverse psychology. Maybe you might try telling them, oh, go on, keep drinking. And then you would track and study the effectiveness of that strategy. But you certainly wouldn't want to be doing the same thing if it didn't work. Correct? So when working with people, you can certainly want them to change, but you also have to study and be really tracking the effectiveness of what you're doing. Because if you keep wanting the client to do something and they're not doing it, and you get frustrated about it and you get angry, that's not really being effective, nor is it being strategic, because you're not noticing the effectiveness of it. Does that help answer that question?
And Claire, if you want to come off of mute to directly respond to that rather than type out, that's also fine.
Yeah, sure. So I guess the thing that I would be most curious about is like, what are those strategies then that you think could prevent someone from stop drinking, versus like if everything that you tried worked, at what point are you like, okay, this person is not going to stop drinking, this person doesn't actually want my help? I don't know, does that make sense?
That makes sense. Good. Yeah, so we can continue here. First of all, let's take a step back and look at the theory of it. Okay, so first of all, there's something called self-determination. Self-determination is a concept that really is defined by honoring people's kind of basic ability to choose and make decisions for themselves. Okay, and self-determination actually is an essential ethical principle for a lot of licenses like MFT and PsyD and a lot of helping professions, the medical doctors. Whether or not they follow that principle is another case, but certainly it's embedded in most helping professions, this ethical principle of self-determination. So we have to start with that. We have to start with understanding that, and understanding that people need to make decisions for themselves, and that we want to help them do that because that's what they need in the long run. We want to get them to become stand on their own 2 feet, right? So the strategy should be first of all centered around and organized around self-determination, and building off of that, building off how to help the person become more self-determined. And then we can go from there. So part of it is also believing in them, believing in their dignity and personhood. And here's, let me bring it back to child development, because I think this will help you understand. So a lot of people that I see in my therapy office, some of them, when I ask them, okay, how do you trust your own feelings? How do you trust your own thoughts? How do you rely on yourself? And a lot of them some of them will say, well, I can't, I don't know what to do. I need other people to tell me, or you tell me what to do. And if we kind of dig in, a lot of the people who don't trust their own feelings and don't trust their own thoughts, and don't really trust or believe in themselves altogether, a lot of them will report that their parents never told them things like, I believe in you. Their parents never told them, I trust you, you can do it. They never were encouraging to them. And so they never really instilled that sense of, well, I know what I'm doing, I can trust myself. Okay, so part of that is that they need somebody to do that, and we can be those people for them. We can encourage people by over time, if you have a relationship with the person, over time, inviting them to trust your thoughts, or believe what you're thinking and feeling. A lot of times the problem is also that the helping professional or the therapist likes to do a lot of challenging. Remember in CBT they call it, challenging the cognitive distortions and all that. I mean, that's great and all, but with regards to this particular issue of self-determination, it only instills a certain sense that, oh, well, you don't know, and I'm going to tell you how to do it, how to think. What we want to do is not tell them how to think, but show them how to help them how to think. Not what to think, but how to think. So we can be curious with them, but we want to develop a certain sense of belief and faith in them. But you have to have that. So when you're working with a client, you have to. I mean, what I do is before I let them into my office, I do a quick little 2-minute meditation where I remind myself that I'm going to trust myself, and I'm going to trust my client, and I'm going to believe in my client. And that energy, I don't know if you believe in that, but there's something about that. I have children, and they feel it. They feel it when I believe in them, when I'm proud of them, or when I feel not suspicious. And it's interesting because for instance, with my daughter, and I used to get upset with her when she would do something, and I would be like, oh, you brat, or this and that. And then I noticed that the more I got like that, the more I got frustrated the more that she would act in the ways that I thought about her. And then I realized, oh, well, what if I see her in the way that I'd like her to become? And I thought to myself, well, I'd like her to become smart and kind and all these positive qualities. And then I started to project that. I started to actually will myself into thinking that about her. And I noticed that she started to fall into that gaze. So that's what's important to do with clients too, is we want to believe in them, and instill that faith. And you also have to remember, people are a lot more resilient than you think. People have a lot more resources. A lot of them have like old skills that they just forgotten about. And they can be uncanny sometimes and surprisingly resourceful. Sometimes we're too quick to assume that they're helpless. Yeah, I don't know if somebody was just unmuted. I don't know if somebody wanted to jump in and say something. Does that help so far?
Yeah, thank you. That actually changed my perspective on a lot of things, and I think will help me grow working with my clients. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm glad. Well, and also think about it this way: don't work harder than your client. What I do is I kind of track and study how much effort they're putting into it, and then I adjust myself accordingly. Because I notice that as soon as I start to want it more than them, it creates an unbalance in the working relationship. It starts to feel more like an uphill battle. And so as soon as I feel any resistance from my client, I back off and I wait, because I just remind myself there's no hurry. I don't need to get anywhere. And also the client should have the dignity to take as much time as they need. We don't need to rush them to get out of homelessness or to heal their trauma or to anything for that matter, right? We can certainly be emotionally available and loving and supportive and present, but we certainly don't have to get anywhere fast. And so as soon as you feel like they're pushing back, that's really an opportunity to be like, okay, well, I've brushed up against a certain edge that's letting me know that I don't want to push any further now. I just need to sit and wait and be. So that's sometimes also something to track is, are you working harder than your client? Yeah. So that's that. And as far as strategies, sometimes you can use paradoxical strategies, like you can say to the client or to your partner, oh, imagine you kept drinking. What if you kept drinking? What would that be like? Remember, you're not condoning of anything by saying that. You're not encouraging drinking. Everybody knows you're trying to help them. But sometimes when you become a policeman of their drinking, they no longer trust you anymore. You're not really there to explore and connect and understand them. You start to become somebody who they have to hide from or lie to, or make it look like they're working on their life, but really they're just not. And then they're just telling you something that you want to hear. Okay. So we want to really kind of drop the agenda and actually just be with them and be curious about them. Oh, so what if you kept drinking? Sounds like drinking is something that part of you likes, at least. And drop to their level and just be curious, that sometimes is a little bit more effective than like, oh, so you drank again, or what are we going to do about this, or sort of becoming patronizing again. So see, that goes against their self-determination. So we want to move away from that sort of parental kind of authoritative stance and be a little bit more of a collaborator and a curious agent, really to help them understand themselves better. Of course, you can also set limits and not, depending on your model, or of course you can say you cannot see them when if they're intoxicated, or set some boundaries. Oh, I'm not available to meet with you unless you're available and clear-headed, so we can work together. And there's certain things you can do on your end too to kind of create the space that is more conducive for your work. But certainly not being frustrated with them.
There is a comment and a couple of questions, I guess, more related to this, and then there's another question that I can return to. So there was a comment on, in order to build trust, you need to show constancy over a long period of time. But then someone asked, if a person suffers from paranoia, how might you be able to gain that person's trust? And then another question about, what about applying harm reduction principles?
Okay, the first question is regards to paranoia. Naturally, I would trust, have them trust that the paranoia is at least something that we can consider. Remember how we started in the beginning, where somebody asked, like, oh, well, there's a part of me that wants to leave this job. Like, should I listen to that part? It's the same idea. So if a client comes in and they give you some completely unreasonable worry or their paranoid thought, if we fight that paranoid thought and say, oh, that's ridiculous, or try to get them to see how unreasonable it is, we're actually instilling in them the certain sense that they shouldn't trust whatever input is arising within them. So what we want to do is we want to say, okay, well, you're having this paranoid thought. Well, okay, wondering what it has to say, or is there any positive intent in what this paranoid thought is saying? Look for the hidden positive intent. Be curious with them, because at least then you're saying, hey, I trust you. And sometimes the client will come in and they say, I don't trust, they'll tell me, I don't trust you as a therapist. And what I'll say to them is, I might say something like, well, I trust your mistrust. It's fair that you don't trust me, because I'm sure that there's been other people that made you not trust, and I'm probably just another one of those people. So it makes sense. So I want to validate. I want to instill that. I want to tell them, hey, look, I want to trust your mistrust, because I want you to trust yourself. That would be the best way to get them to see that you're a real person. Okay. And as far as harm reduction, I think harm reduction is great as long as it doesn't impede on mutual respect. If you don't feel respected, if you don't feel safe in the room or in whatever space that you're participating in, it's not good for them. If you have to endure some kind of disrespect, however it looks like, it's probably not good for them either, because you're allowing them to be a perpetrator or something like that. You're creating the conditions for them to experience themselves as a perpetrator. If they're being vulgar towards you, or impinging on your personal space or something like that, and then it crosses the line of mutual respect. So harm reduction is fine as long as you can feel safe and comfortable and you feel like you can do your work, by all means. But don't feel like you have to, let go of your boundaries just to see the client. Okay. This little quote says, "Teacher, what does it mean to work on yourself?" And he says, "It is to stop waiting for others to change." Okay, we're going to move along here. I usually cover this, in a lot of my trainings, I cover this sort of Taoist perspective of flow. Life occurs naturally in sequence with a beginning, middle, and end. And I live by this principle of allowance. And it's defined by learning to allow life to unfold without fighting it or attempting to make it stay the same. There's a certain kind of organic flow in life. You know, the seasons change, and there's a certain level of impermanence in life. And if you try to prevent that from happening, you will suffer. If you try to hold on to things and want them to stay the same, you will suffer. So allowance can also be defined as the natural harmony of the organism environment. That is what they call Zen as well. It's a natural harmony with you and your environment, so that you're not fighting against it. And so allowing your anxiety, low mood or feelings, etc., allow others to have their feelings and reactions. Now, keep in mind, allowance is different from apathy. It's not the same thing as not caring. You can have a certain sense of unrest or and injustice or anger about things, but it's about allowing those feelings, right? It's not about this stuffing them down. We do not need to fix or change things right away. Sometimes we can sit with them and learn to just allow them. And also we can learn to validate our own feelings and let them move through us instead of fighting them. Even anger, you know, anger is a part of us that loves us. If you didn't have anger, then you would let people walk all over you, or you would let people mistreat you. So the anger is a part of us that says, hey, that's not okay, out of self-love. So you want to allow your anger. Now, you don't want to act on your anger necessarily to become violent, but you can certainly feel your anger. Allow yourself to feel your anger in your body. A lot of times anger is the kind of feeling that we're taught not to have, you know, by when we're younger. Oh, don't get angry, you know, and don't cry. So this is going back to that, right? So a lot of times the reason why we have such a hard time coping with life and with our jobs and in helping professions especially is because we're coming from a general parenting style across the board where most of us were sort of told not to have our feelings. Don't do this, don't do that, don't feel that, don't feel this, you know. So we want to actually kind of come back to allowing our feelings, allowing ourselves to feel sad, allowing ourselves to feel anxious, and also allowing ourselves to validate the anxiousness. The anxiousness maybe is worried about something, and maybe acknowledging, oh, I'm worried about that. Interesting. Not trying to get rid of it, not trying to manage and reduce what we're feeling, but what more understand and have curiosity and compassion for it. Any comments about this part? This is a nice quote by Muji. It says, say to your mind, get as depressed as you want. I'm only going to observe you, but I'm not going to join you. So that's kind of the idea, right? That some people think, oh, you want me to allow my depression, or you want me to allow my sadness, and I'm just going to fall into some abyss. But my question to you is, ever try? It's not actually what you think. You know, I think being more observant of yourself and not participating in it is different than dwelling. So allowance is sort of synonymous with mindfulness, being more observant of yourself. Okay. And here we have this little chart called the universal flow perspective. And you could think about it as yourself as like a hollow vessel, which is this flow of feelings here. and life is flowing through you. And there are two types of resistance. There is the pushing away, which is I can push away a feeling, like I can push away my sadness, or I can swallow it down, or kind of push it away, or any feeling for that matter. And that's the first level of resistance. Now I can allow that. I can allow my sadness, and it will flow through me. And then it reaches another point of resistance, which is holding on. And once I allow it, then I can feel it, but then I can also hold on to it. Like, I won't let this go, resentment or clinging on to certain feelings. And then that's another way that you can sort of clog up your system. But ideally, if you want to be in a state of flow, you want to not push feelings away, and you also not want to hold on to them either. So you want to sort of allow the feeling, feel it, and then let it go. So like you're kind of a current, a flow. And that is sort of the optimal way of being with yourself. And this comes from sort of a Taoist perspective. Okay. I'm going to move along unless somebody has any comments so far. No. Okay. Okay. So another really important piece.
Someone is asking if we could see the teacher slide again. And then there's
Which one? This one?
Yes. And then someone's asking, what does it feel like to have a steady flow of feelings without resistance?
The question is to me?
Yeah.
Oh, it feels like $1 million. You know, I wouldn't say that I'm like that 24 hours a day, but I definitely think that practicing mindfulness and becoming more attentive to where I'm holding on or resisting or bracing or tensing creates more of that sense of ease. It feels like ease. It feels like a natural kind of state. Now, some people may call it ecstasy. Well, I mean, ecstasy is defined by the lack of static. So ecstatic meaning there's no static, and static is noise, like white noise, like shh. And so to be ecstatic it means that you don't have any noise, any extra clutter around. So I guess being in flow is sort of like being in a state of ecstasy, which is, I guess, in a place of flow and ease would be the best way to describe it. Okay. So now let's move on to boundaries, because I think this is another strategy that I want you guys to focus on when you are working with your communities. Now, the way that I define boundaries is a little bit different than maybe you've heard. How I define boundaries is something that we set for ourselves, not for other people. So from my perspective, you set a boundary with yourself, not with another person, which is a little bit different from other models. But let me tell you why this is a much more sound way to do it. If we set boundaries for other people, then we are dependent on them to follow through with the boundary. So then it's not really a boundary, right? So if I tell Nicole, oh, Nicole, please don't use vulgar language with me, and then she does, then what kind of boundary is it? Like, I didn't really set a boundary. All I did was ask her to do something, and then she didn't do it. So what I'm inviting you to do is actually reconstruct your whole idea of boundaries, and think about that. What if a boundary was something that I could set for me, with me, and that nobody could break it? So if we need to depend on others to uphold our boundaries, then they are not really boundaries. Maybe they're called requests or demands. Okay. So how do we set boundaries with ourselves? Well, we have to start with taking an inventory of what we are available for and what we're not available for. So let's say, for example, let's say if I don't like to be spoken to in a vulgar manner, okay? Then I have to create a boundary with myself and tell myself, Dimitri, if you are experiencing vulgar language directed at you, what do you need to do about it? And then I tell myself, well, if that happens to me, I'll walk out of the room. Okay. So then if Nicole uses vulgar language at me, my boundary would be not to stay. Now, if I stay and she continues to use vulgar language with me, then I've broken my own boundary. I can only break my own boundaries when I set them for me. So of course I cannot listen to my boundary. If I told myself, okay, from now on, I'm not gonna stay in the room if somebody's speaking to me in a vulgar way. But if I break that contract with myself, then I've broken my own boundary. And boundaries, you can think about it as almost like universal principles. I'm only gonna be available to be talked to in a kind and respectful way. I'm not going to be available to be around people who are violent or intoxicated. You know, you can create a whole list of, and that's something that I want you guys to do actually today, or later today, or even during this training or tonight. This may take you a little while. You maybe get a journal or something. What I want you to do is write a list of all the ways that you're available, what you're available for and what you're not available for, and then write out what you're willing to do, what you're going to do if that happens for yourself. So it's really a contract with yourself. Again, same thing with drinking. Going back to the drinking, this is an old example that I've used at this training before. If for instance, I'm going to use Nicole, I'm going to pick on Nicole because it's the easiest name. If I told Nicole not to drink, and because she gets kind of starts acting out or starts mistreating me, and then I tell her not to drink, then every time she drinks, then I'm going to feel like betrayed or something, or abused. But if I tell her, hey, keep drinking, but you know, when you drink, I'm just going to step out, or I'm not going to be hanging out when you drink, and it's just something that I'm going to be doing for myself. It's nothing against you. It's my form of self-care. I'm just not going to hang out. And so you become responsible for your own well-being this way, because you're not depending on others to adjust their life to you so that you can feel better. You get to do that, which is really liberating if you think about it. I'm curious what you guys think.
There is a question in the chat. What if the boundaries we set for ourselves look like we're slacking off to other people?
I think sometimes it helps to make a declarative statement so that to help them understand what you're doing. I think first of all, yes, you have to set the boundary within yourself and to decide what you're going to do. And then it's also helpful to declare your boundary with the other person and say, hey, you know what? It feels a little bit uncomfortable for me sometimes when you raise your voice, or the way that you talk. And so when I hear that, when I hear you raise your voice, I'm going to start taking space for myself as a way to just take care of myself from now on. I'm just letting you know that. So sometimes it's good to make a declarative statement about the boundaries that you're setting with yourself so that the person doesn't get the wrong idea. It helps them to understand. Does that make sense?
I'm seeing also someone share in the comments that they used to question that too, but they remind themselves that the way others think about them is out of their control, and their boundaries are for them and their personal health, regardless of what others think.
Right. And that's kind of part of our next part about ownership of feelings. Everybody is responsible for their own feelings. We don't need to people please them. We could certainly be compassionate towards them, but in the process of caring for yourself, sometimes people will be hurt. And that's why I have this quote here. The only people who get upset when you set boundaries are the ones who benefited from you having none. Okay, I'll read it again. The only people who get upset when you set boundaries are the ones who benefited from you having none. So in a certain sense, I guess we have to make room for that. That if I start setting boundaries for myself in the ways that I haven't, that must mean that there's going to be a bit of a rift, because people have become accustomed to my lack of boundaries with myself, and they have become using that relationship in a certain way. So when I stop doing that, there will be some discomfort around that. And we have to leave room and understand that that may happen. The thing is, people aren't just going to be like, oh, great, you're setting boundaries with yourself. I love it. Thank you for doing that. It's unreasonable. Right? This is a little bit of this is actually a sheet that I teach my students with. So it's a little bit complicated, but I threw it in here so you can read it over on your own. It goes a little bit in depth about boundaries and projection, and it goes into the difference between being responsible and responsive, something that is, I think, addresses the last question too. That the difference between being responsible and responsive is that if somebody feels sad, I can be responsive to them, meaning that I can say, oh, are you okay? How are you doing? And I may choose to interact or participate or get involved. But being responsible means that somehow their sadness is mine, that I have to take responsibility for it, like I caused it, or it is my sadness. And other people's feelings are never your responsibility. So that's the bridge. The bridge is being responsive. Not just be like, okay, whatever, I don't care. You're sad, I don't care, that's not my problem. That's not what I'm trying to tell you to do. Just in case you were thinking that. But yes, setting boundaries has to do with taking responsibility for yourself, and then acknowledging that the other people may generate or accrue pain as a result. I like this line here. Those of us who take responsibility and ownership for ourselves will be able to be free to resolve our issues and make changes. As long as we try to make others responsible, we will be dependent on them changing before we can change. This is called dependent relationship and enmeshment. Take a look at this chart on your own when they send you the PDF. It's got a lot of really cool stuff, but I really want to move us along. But this is a little thing that you can have, and it's got some good stuff in here. Okay. Okay, so here's a little chart that we're going to get into next. So part of your strategy to overcome compassion fatigue and burnout and things like that. So think about it this way. If you get present and you get expanded in your awareness, you will have more choice in making decisions for yourself, taking responsibility for yourself. And remember, with every choice, you have inner choices and outer choices. Okay, inner choices are ways that you think and feel about things, and outer choices are ways that you set limits and participate with life. Now, sometimes you can't make outer choices because maybe, for instance, somebody's passed away, like your mom or your grandmother, but you can choose how you feel about them. You can forgive them or whatever, change the way you think, not get offended by somebody. And sometimes they are present in your life, and you have to make dynamic changes with boundaries. And sometimes the choice is a combination of dynamic boundaries and inner relationship in your mind about how you want to feel and think about the situation. Okay, that's a choice. That's how I break down a choice between inner peace and outer dynamism. This is a chart that explains this. So the moment you change your perception is the moment you rewrite the chemistry of your body. See, there's a person here who is looking at the bee, and then this other person is looking at the bee as well. In this person's head, they have honey, and in this person's head, they have the death symbol. And they have different chemicals flowing through their body. See how they have sort of, this one has happy ones, this one has sad ones, or whatever, scary ones. So the idea is that the perception is important. Okay, so that's where we have to own that. We have to take responsibility and own our feelings. It's natural to have feelings or reactions to life. Sometimes we can look for opportunities to change how we respond to people and circumstances. If we experience anger or sadness, we have to be careful not to necessarily blame or attribute the actions of other people or situations as the cause of those feelings. Okay, so if somebody said something and you say, "Oh, they made me sad," or "They made me mad," I want you to start changing your language, even inside of yourselves, to at least start to say things like, "Well, I had a reaction," or "I reacted with anger," or "I reacted with sadness," because then at least you're looking at the ways in which you're participating in the situation. And although you may not have, immediate conscious choice about what kind of feelings are arising, because sometimes you just feel spontaneously angry or whatever, but at least you can own that that's me having it. Like, they're not making me feel angry. Nobody can make you feel anything. Nobody has that power. And you thinking that they have that power is just a thought. It's just an idea. It's not real. No one has that power. Not yet, at least, unless you're some kind of have a super psychic power or something. So ownership and responsibility is liberating and freeing and gives you more control. So that you don't project onto other people. Now, strictly speaking, I don't know if you guys know the term projection. Projection is when let's say you wake up in the morning and you feel frustrated, or you feel kind of irritated or something like that. Now, as you go through the day, things are going to irritate you. And projection is thinking that those are the things that are the cause of your irritation, like somebody cutting you off on the road, traffic, somebody saying something to you. Now, what you have to start to look at is that sometimes when you wake up, you already are feeling irritated. It's originating within you. And then your brain is what's doing, it's just kind of tethering or affirming outside circumstances to say, oh, those are the things causing it. But it was already there to begin with. And you know that because sometimes you wake up in the morning and you feel great and everything doesn't bother you. The traffic doesn't bother you. Your clients don't bother you. So it has to do with that there are feelings that are originating within us. And projection is when we project feelings that we already have onto circumstances and people. And that can really snowball, because then you can really feel like a victim of the world and of the circumstances. So we want to pull you out of that. So start by identifying what you're feeling and how you're reacting to the moment. Okay.
There was a question on how do you balance not taking responsibility for others' emotions with holding yourself accountable for your role in the arising of the emotions?
Can you read that again, please?
Yes. How do you balance not taking responsibility for others' emotions with holding yourself accountable for your role in the arising of the emotions?
Yeah, so good question. You can take responsibility for what you did, but not how they reacted to it. So for instance, let's say if I'm talking to Nicole and Nicole says, Dimitri, what you said really hurt me, and I didn't like the way you judged me. And I feel really sad now that you judged me. I can't take responsibility for her sadness, but what I can take responsibility is for the way in which I said it. So I might say something like, Nicole, you're right. I don't like the way I said that. I don't like the way I evaluated you and I described you negatively. I'm sorry for doing that. So I'm taking responsibility for what I did, not your feeling. I have to look at how, yes, taking responsibility for how I'm participating, but I can't take responsibility for how you reacted. I can't say, oh, I'm sorry that you feel sad, or because that's not up to me how you feel. But I can certainly examine myself and ask myself, did I like the way I talked to Nicole? Is there any way in which I communicated that doesn't feel good to me? And if there isn't, I need to stand corrected. I need to own that, no, I don't like the way I did that. So you see how there's a difference between owning what you did and then owning their feelings or owning their reactions. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And then it was a while back and I unfortunately missed it, but there's a question that I can perhaps read out and then you can decide whether that's something you answer now or come back to.
Okay.
Sorry, let me just find it. We as an agency are committed to hiring those with lived experience of homelessness. However, we'd like to know what we can do to mitigate reactivating any trauma related to their experience in serving those who are currently experiencing homelessness. Do you have any advice?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've worked with a lot of homeless people. I've worked at a Momentum and Kaiser Adult Psychiatry throughout my stay, and the hard thing is that it's hard not, and we have sometimes very little control of re-traumatizing them, because a lot of times they're re-traumatizing themselves all the time just by being triggered. So unfortunately, there's sometimes you will trigger your clients, whether you try not to or not, whether you try to do your best. But I would definitely say practicing being present and emotionally available to them and kind is the first step. And the other part is, we talked about not having an agenda, not judging them, validating their experience, no matter how unreasonable and illogical their story may be. Having understanding for them and for their position, even in their own self-defeatedness, and just blasting them with compassion and fascination is the best that you can do. But as far as they will still project onto you. You will still you will still remind them of people who they've been hurt by. So it's sometimes almost hard to escape, but all you can do is do your best. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Tim, would you like to come off of mute? And
Yes, it does answer my question. Thank you, Dimitri. Great advice.
Okay. I like this quote. Every time I judge someone else, I reveal an unhealed part of myself. Just something to throw in there. And a lot of times when we judge people or where we have certain reactions, it's a deeper thing. You know, this man is like having a certain maybe judgment or something. And if he looks within, he may find that there's some anger. And if he goes deeper than anger, he might find some sadness. And if he goes deeper than the sadness, he may find some, you know, inner child that's sad or lonely or something like that. And that's really the inner child work is something that we all have to kind of come to terms with, because within us is an inner child, and those first formative years are really what our entire life is organizing around. You know, how whatever unmet needs we had or how we were treated shapes how we are today. You know, our relationship with our spouses and our triggers and things like that. So part of the work in helping people is really doing a lot of your own work. You cannot survive without looking at some of your own inner pain, and what really loving yourself within will help you become more at ease when sitting with other people's pain. And this little thing says what we think healing looks like, and says meditating peacefully. This part says what healing actually looks like: unpacking trauma, having difficult conversations, taking radical responsibility for our actions, implementing healthy routines, and then setting and enforcing boundaries. So that's just a little chart on what you will have to do. And that doesn't mean you have to do it alone, but it means that with the help of others, we can help each other do this. Let's see, we have, how much time do we have? About 10 minutes. I think I'm gonna see if I wanna skip this. You could kind of go over this chart later. I'm gonna skip this, but this just kind of shows you kind of like different stances you could take. Like you can overextend yourself by kind of reaching your hands out, and you can kind of be a little bit self-absorbed by putting your hands together. And then the optimal stance to be with your client is like one hand on your heart, one hand out. It's a sort of an energetic template that I teach when working with clients. It's like, you don't actually have to do this with your hands when you're with the clients, but you can practice it on your own. It's sort of you want to stay connected to yourself, and then you want to be available to your client. It's sort of like a really balanced way to be with people. Because if you're not connected to yourself, you can't help the person. So, but I want to leave a room for a little bit of a meditation. We only have about 10 minutes left. Okay, so before we do the meditation, just to help you understand, this little sphere, it shows the layers of yourself. So imagine that within you there are kind of superficial layers, and then there's more profound or deep layers within us. And if our goal is to sort of get to know ourselves or become more in touch with ourselves, we have to understand that there are depths within us. And the most shallow and least reliable faculty is our thoughts, because thoughts are subject to distortion, and you know, people do things because they have certain beliefs or concepts that doesn't make them real. You know, so thoughts are useful to a certain degree. Of course, we have to do things and do math and be logical about things, but as far as our own personal growth or spiritual growth or emotional growth, we cannot rely on that to understand ourselves. Okay, so you have to see, okay, I have my thoughts. If I go beneath my thoughts, there's the emotional layer. Now, the emotions are obviously much more profound, because, you know, if you feel sad, that's a much more profound experience than just a thought, right? So it's a deeper feeling. So that now we're going into something a little bit more reliable, something that you can actually start to focus on and be with and tend to understand yourself. But even emotions are still, they're sort of like a midway, and they still kind of come and go. They're kind of like waves, and there's sometimes you can be under the spell of sadness, or under the spell of anger, or under the spell of lust, and sort of it comes and goes. But if you go even beneath that, you get to the core faculty, which is sensation. Sensation is the ground of being. It is the basic way that you know you exist, through your sensation. Even right now, whatever you're doing, you know, you can kind of touch your hands, or any sensation that you can feel right now. You know you exist because of those sensations. And so that is the most reliable faculty within us, is to feel the sensation, feel the texture. And this sensation actually encompasses all of them, because there are always sensations. Even sadness has a sensation. You know, maybe it's a heaviness, maybe it's a fatigue, maybe it feels like a watering in your eyes. So there's always sensations to everything. And so what I wanted to invite you to and teach you is how to really drop deeper into your sensational realm, and that will give you a much more accurate understanding of who you are. This is a little thing that says using mindfulness to create distance from your thoughts. And that's kind of like what I said, is to get away from this sort of feeding into the thought, but actually kind of stepping out of it. So the guy says, I'm not good enough. And he's crying. And then here he says, I'm noticing that I'm having a thought that I'm not good enough. And he's not crying. He's just being kind of curious. That's mindfulness. Mindfulness is sort of the observing and distancing from the experience and kind of watching it. So, and by observing the sensation in your body, you have the opportunity to connect with the secondary signal, which is this information that's coming into your body about things that are happening that you don't know. Maybe stresses or traumas, or signals, or even guidance from your body that you just are not aware of. Okay, so with that being said, I really want us to have some time to do a meditation, because that's really the staple of what I do. So what I want to do is invite you guys to find a comfortable place and close your eyes if you can. And I want you to just let your arms rest and kind of sit upright, more or less. And what I want you to do is start with just noticing your nostrils. And noticing as the air brushes up against your nostrils. Notice the texture as the air brushes up against your nostrils. Maybe cool air, maybe a tingling sensation. Any sensation just where the air brushes up against the nostrils. And see if you can let go of any other preoccupation or to-do list, what you're going to do later at work or later tonight, and just commit yourself to being focused just on the breathing at the tips of the nostrils. And then from there, what I want you to try to do is follow the breathing from your nostrils inside and noticing the sensations along the way as the air goes into the esophagus and flows down into your chest. And as you breathe into the chest, notice what kind of sensations arise as the air inhabits your lungs. And as you notice them, remember there is no good or bad sensation. It's just sensation. So you don't have to have any favoritism or look for anything. Just be curious. Any sensation in the chest. Your job is to just be curious and to track and notice. And don't get bored. Stay fascinated with yourself. And then if you'd like, you can allow the air to also gently drop into your tummy. And check in what's happening in your tummy. Any sensation. And then from here, I want you to take another minute or so to find some completion here. Find some way to slowly start to come back to your room. And you can slowly start to open your eyes. And looks like we're pretty much at the end of the hour. I don't know if there's any last things that I can be here for. I hope this was beneficial to you. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me. You'll have my email and other information that can be of support to you. I'd love that.
Seeing a lot of thank yous in the chat, that it was so beneficial, an amazing learning opportunity, and how much they greatly appreciate this training. want to echo all of those exuberant thank yous to you, Dimitri. It's always such a delight to have you lead these trainings. So thank you so much. And just want to kindly remind folks, Carla popped it in the chat. Carla, if you could pop it in once more. We have a feedback form. We try and make them super short, but we really use these to tailor up. Okay, there is a question on if you have a private practice, Dimitri. Fill in the feedback form and I'll let Dimitri answer that.
Yeah, my private practice is www.spiralprocess.com, one word, spiralprocess.com, and I'm in Campbell. It's also, it'll be on your slides at the last page and I think the front page as well. So feel free to reach out. Me and my wife both practice together. So.
Well, it is 3 o'clock, so I want to respect everyone's time. Thank you so much for being here. Dimitri, just want to let you know, someone was very grateful for those few moments of meditation and noted that it helped them with their headache. Their headache went away.
That's great. And just for you guys, I know this was a super short meditation and I wish we could do it longer. Try it on your own. And also, if you like, you can YouTube body scan. There's a million different ones. John Kabat-Zinn has one. There's a bunch of other ones on YouTube. Anyone will do. Any form where they could just some kind of even just YouTube body scan where they can a voice can guide you through the body. You can do it on your own. Okay.
Well, thank you, everyone.
All right, guys. All the best to you. Have a beautiful day. Take care.
Thank you. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to close the meeting for everyone, but thank you all for being here. And once again, please fill out the feedback form if you haven't already. Have a lovely day.